Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and healing from narcissistic relationships or any relationship where you're invalidated. So let's talk about the different types of groups of people I encounter when I talk about healing. Let's take that on. Because really there's three groups of folks. It's not as simple as there's three groups of people in the world, but there's three groups I encounter as I talk about healing from narcissistic relationships or how they affect you, or figure out what group you're even in. Like I said, it's not so simplistic as that there are simply three groups of people in the world. I know that. But in this space of talking about being in these relationships and healing from these relationships, there are sort of three big groups that approach this conversation about narcissism very differently. I was recently preparing some professional work on narcissism, and I got some pushback from another psychologist about it. The psychologist did not think narcissistic abuse and gaslighting are a thing. That obviously frustrated me because it reminded me how many people might actually seek out mental health help and be told that these aren't a thing. And it only angered me because I also have to waste a lot of time addressing this person's comments, which wasted a lot of time. But it also means, again, like I said, there's not a small number of folks in positions of power and decision-making, such as therapists, healthcare professionals, teachers, judges, lawyers, policymakers, who not only don't get this, they don't want to get this. And they make decisions that can re-harm the people who are already having to navigate the mess raised by relationships with narcissistic people. But three groups did emerge as I sort of fought this fight with this person. So let's break them down, because honestly, most of you watching this probably fall into one of these three groups, and most of you fall into one of these three groups. There can be movement between some, but typically not all three of these with time. So listen up, figure out which one sort of suits you best. So let's start with group one. These are the narcissistic and antagonistic people themselves. And we can make this bucket bigger and have it be a bucket that holds all antagonistic people. So this would be anyone who is entitled, arrogant, lacks or has variable empathy, chronically selfish, manipulative, emotionally dysregulated, chronically needs admiration and validation, is callous, calculating, you know the list. These folks may or may not have a full-blown personality disorder. It doesn't matter. If they have enough of this personality style, enough of these qualities, patterns, traits, that it colors most of their interactions, that's who we're talking about. This is sort of broadly speaking, the group that is not attuned to other people, and they kind of don't care. And subsequently, this group is obviously the source of the strife and the interpersonal harms to the people who are in these relationships. Folks who are narcissistic or antagonistic also don't take responsibility, so they aren't going to own it. We can't do anything about this group. We can't change them. We have to be aware of these dynamics, ideally avoid it, learn the workarounds, radical acceptance, all the rest of it, right? This group is the reason everyone else needs to heal. The second group are the people who have been harmed by the narcissistic folks. We are the children, the family members, the siblings, the partners, the spouses, the fiancés, the friends, the colleagues, the employees, and even the parents of narcissistic and antagonistic people. We have been dismissed, minimized, manipulated, gaslighted, raged at, invalidated, discarded, dominated, controlled, betrayed, neglected, future faked, and psychologically effed with, sometimes for entire lifetimes. We tend to blame and doubt ourselves, wonder if we are the problem, struggle with being enough, try to change ourselves to appease them. We are anxious, hypervigilant, confused, helpless, we feel powerless, lonely, isolated, we ruminate, we have tons of regret, we live in grief, and it may have even affected our health. Especially for folks who have been long-term survivors, long time, have also been doubted, trivialized, and questioned, or even shamed and criticized for suggesting that someone close to us could be narcissistic. Only in recent years has there even been more meaningful discourse on the healing of people in this group. I like this group. I have devoted my career to this group. This is a group of people who have silenced themselves to appease the narcissistic folks or simply to stay close to them because nobody taught any of us what this was. The third group is the group who has never in any significant way experienced narcissistic and antagonistic relationships. These folks are not narcissistic, otherwise they'd be in group 1. I guess one could say that this group, group 3, are just plain lucky. They had nice parents, they had nice marriages. Yeah, they may have had a few jerky partners here and there, but nothing more than the stuff of youth. And they went on to a very, very happy marriage. They have nice friends. They work with nice folks. Yes, this it's not the Twilight Zone. This does exist. I have seen it. Maybe these folks sometimes live in places that are not so hustle bustle. They stick with the same groups of people for long periods of time, so there's far less risk of new narcissistic people coming into the system. They may work in smaller workplaces where there is a lower probability, just as a numbers game, of a narcissistic person being present. Maybe they work in less narcissism-heavy industries. But when it comes down to brass tacks, these folks are just lucky. It wasn't by design. They aren't discernment geniuses. We don't pick our parents. They're lucky. Now this group, group 3, has sort of 2 subgroups under it. Subgroup 1 is the people that this has never happened to, but they are curious about it, and they won't gaslight or invalidate friends or anyone close to them to whom narcissistic abuse happens. They're just nice people who've had nice lives, and in a way, when they have a friend or someone dear to them experience narcissistic abuse, they're confused, and it's kind of a bit of a loss of innocence for them because they may very truly believe and have experienced pretty consistently good in just about everyone they've met, and they really believe everyone can change. All that, it makes sense. It's what's always happened around them. The second subgroup here, a little bit more tricky. These are the same thing. It's never happened to them. And so they don't think narcissistic abuse is a thing. They may even be a little self-righteous and judgy and shamey when people talk about it having happened to them, right? They may be the ones who say, well, you shouldn't diagnose someone, you're not a doctor. Or that they'll say, there's 2 sides to everything, or I never had any trouble with them, or maybe you're the one who's the problem, or don't be disrespectful about your parents. This second group, the sort of group 3B, I guess, this group is quite often enablers and emboldeners. But they're a unique group of enablers because they themselves have not had much contact with narcissistic folks. They're sort of in some sort of Truman Show, glassy-eyed happy land, which good for them, but they're not able to hold a reality that's different than theirs. And the idea that folks can have these kinds of toxic personalities. This subgroup of the third group, this sort of group 3B, is fascinating to me. I have run into it in folks who are therapists, folks who are just out in the world. They aren't just sweet about it, right? Like the first group. They almost think that if there are people experiencing narcissistic abuse, then it's the fault of the person who is being narcissistically abused, because in their perfect little universe, this isn't happening, so I guess it doesn't exist. It's the sort of arrogance of the happy. There is a privilege to this group, and as a result, they don't have to get the point of view of other people. Remember, the people in this group 3B, they're not narcissistic. This just simply never happened to them. They may have marginal empathy, they may be a little dismissive, but other than this one topic, they may be okay. People may say they're actually helpful people, that they listen to them, that they aren't arrogant. One could make the argument that there is a fourth group. And okay, I'd buy that these would be the people who are going through narcissistic abuse or have gone through it, but they are not willing to see it for what it is, or they're not able to see it. It's almost like they're a bit betrayal blindness-y, right? So they also may become enablers. These are the folks, for example, in a family system that has narcissistic people in it. So group 4 has had contact with narcissists, right? So maybe they're in a family that has narcissistic people in it. They themselves are not narcissistic, but they do doubt, invalidate, and question the memories of other people in the system who are talking about how harmful the narcissistic person's behavior in that family was. The 4th group is more of a mix of trauma bonding, betrayal blindness, denial, and they may be experiencing a lot of the stuff that other people in group 2, the folks who have been narcissistically abused, have experienced, but they don't see it, won't see it, or can't see it. For this group, seeing it means sometimes having to shatter the status quo, and that's just too much for them. They are still holding on to the fantasy, the hope that it can get better. So anyone who may suggest otherwise and speak to their reality of the situation may be shut down by them. This sort of group 4, I know some sweet, decent people who are in this situation, and they say it in as many words, like, Ramani, please don't tell me this is not going to change. I know you know, but if I have to give up hope, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. And it breaks my heart when I watch these people, because their hearts are getting broken on the daily, and having to have these narcissistic relationships is hurting their overall health and well-being, but they're not willing to see it for what it is. So why is this important? Because just because you finally understand narcissism, radically accept, and are healing, do not expect that everyone, or even over half of people you encounter in your process of healing, will be nice. I recently tuned into a few episodes of that show, The Last of Us, right? It scared me, so I couldn't finish it all. But it was so in that post-apocalyptic kind of road movie, there were all sorts of zombies and infected people and raider dangers. And then sprinkled in there were a handful of decent folks who would provide shelter and weapons or resources or information. And you had to be protected against all the mess of what the world had become. The process of healing is similar. It's why folks healing from relationships have to be careful to not fall into heal-quick schemers who do prey on people and say, you could get better in 2 weeks, or to step away from people who are invalidating what you experienced, to be discerning so as to not allow more narcissistic folks in, to figure out who is safe enough in your world to share the reality of your situation with, to choose a therapist who hears you and understands what happened to you, to disengage from folks who shame you for calling it narcissistic abuse. It almost makes the raiders and the zombies seem like an easy dodge, because a lot of these people who may actually hamper your healing are hiding in plain sight. And many of the people who don't get it, they're not necessarily cruel or malevolent people. They just haven't been through it, and they may look at you oddly when you share your experiences, which for many survivors can bring up more shame. While I don't think healing is necessarily a post-apocalyptic landscape, it is every bit as treacherous as The Last of Us, right? And while, for example, the community of folks who watch these videos and other communities that have been through this, they get this, not everyone does. And that can really play on self-doubt. Recognize that there are these groups and subgroups, and also recognize that not everyone has been through this. And as a result, more than a few folks can't be there for you, especially in your early stages of healing. Not nearly as many as you may need. There can be a lot of grief around this, but understanding that there are these different groups can help you understand that, no, it's not that there's something wrong with you. I'm not even saying that there are zombies or raiders, but there's just some people who will not be able to hear this and be with this, whether it's because it hasn't happened to them, whether they're in denial. So a big part of healing is discernment, not just so you can avoid future narcissistic folks, but you also don't let people in too close who may not be able to be there the way you need, especially in the early phases of your healing. Thanks again.